Good afternoon and welcome to this UniTaster Tuesday. My name is John. I'm here from UniTasterDays and I'm going to be hosting this event today, where today we're going to be looking at student finance and also budgeting at university. So whether you're watching this and perhaps you're concerned about how you're going to pay for university when you get there, or you might be watching this and thinking about maybe saving some money before you start, this event is going to be really useful for you. I'm delighted to be joined by two speakers from two different universities today that are going to explore this really important subject. We're going to open things up in a second from Jordan, who's joining us from the University of Hull. Jordan is going to talk about budgeting and student finance really before you start. So the key things to know before you actually start university, whether that's saving money ready for university before you start, all the key things to know about student finance before you start as well. And Ellen is joining us from Bishop Grosseteste University, and Ellen's going to give you some tips about when you're actually at university. So budgeting when you're on the course, and also touching on some of the really important student finance aspects to know about when you're at university, be that repayments or anything else when you finish. I'm always conscious with these events you've tuned in to hear from our excellent speakers, not from myself. So with that, I'll pass the floor to our first speaker, please. That's Jordan, joining us from the University of Hull with some student finance tips before you start university. Over to you, Jordan.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John. It's a real pleasure to be able to spend some time in your company and hopefully give you some helpful hints and tips when it comes to budgeting and managing your money at university. So as John mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the pre-university ways in which you can organise your finances, maybe make sure you've got enough money to cover the things that you might need to spend on your way into university. And then Ellen's going to take over from there and talk about the cost at university itself. Before I actually share my slides with you, I thought it'd be helpful if you knew a little bit about myself. So again, my name's Jordan Milnes. I'm originally from Manchester, but I'm actually a graduate of the University of Hull. So I made the move over from Manchester to Hull in 2002. I did a 4 years American Studies course. And then after working a few different jobs for a few years, I actually went and did a master's for social work. So in terms of how my experience is relevant to this session, I've been through the student finance process. I've managed successfully and unsuccessfully to budget my money over the years. And hopefully through my mistakes, you can maybe get a bit of insight. So there have been times where I've had £10 to spend on food and all of my items for a week because I've not budgeted very well. There's been times when I've had to phone family and friends and ask to borrow a few quid for a couple of weeks to get me by. So like I say, hopefully you'll be able to learn from my mistakes. Okay, I'm going to share my slides with you now and then we'll get started. So I thought it'd be really helpful to start today by looking really at what money will be available for you to spend. So it's going to be a little bit of a recap on student finance generally. You might be a little bit familiar with it, but hopefully you'll understand why I'm doing so. I think when it comes to university, when it comes to managing your money at university, the key to doing well really is to have a successful budget. And the important starting point for any budget is to know what your budget is, what money you have to spend. So like I say, I'm just going to touch through student finance very quickly for you. Fantastic. So firstly, what do you get for student finance? Well, I'm sure you all know you're entitled to the tuition fee loan that covers all your course costs. So that covers the £9,250 that it costs to study your course at university. But obviously, that's not the number we're interested in because that's not money that's coming to us. And that's not going to help us with our budget. What we're interested in today is the maintenance loan, because the maintenance loan is the thing that covers your living costs at university. So you do get a loan to help you pay for the things that you need to spend at university. And these loans are available to full-time students. The amount you get is different depending on your situation. So it can depend on your household income. So the amount of money that's coming into your household, maybe through parents or carers. And it also can differ depending on where you live. So for example, if you live at home, you don't quite get as much money. If you live in London, you actually get more money because the cost of living is quite expensive in London. So if you can look at the table on the right-hand side, I'm sure you can see there, if your household income is under £25,000 and you're living away from home, you'll get £9,203. Now, the great thing about student finance is there's an element of budgeting built into it, and that it's paid into your bank account in 3 different installments. So obviously, if you were getting the maximum amount in around about October time, after you've registered actually at university, you'll be getting about £3,000. Then again in February, and then again in around about May time. So there's almost a little bit of a budget built in for you there. As you can see, as your household income does increase, the amount of money you're entitled to actually decreases. So if you're living away from home, the smallest amount you can get is £4,289. So again, we look at these figures because it's important to know what our budget is so that we can prepare ourselves for university and how we're going to look after our money at university. Now, it's important to note, although that's a maintenance loan, some people might struggle to get by on that amount of money, particularly if you fall kind of in the lower end of the finances there. So you might need the opportunity to maybe top up your money. Now, the student loan system is set up and the maintenance loan system is set up to be related to your household income, because there is an assumption that someone in your household will help to supplement your income at university. Although I'm sure we all know that's not strictly true. There might be some people who aren't entitled to too much, but are actually kind of, their parents aren't choosing to give them too much money at university. So you might need to supplement your income through a part-time job. A lot of people at the moment do get part-time jobs at university. One of my friends, in fact, at university, she had a part-time job and she worked about 10, 12 hours a week, and she essentially called that her fun budget. That was her going out money. That was for her to spend on the things that she wanted to spend rather than the things that she needed to spend money on. So that's one approach you could take if you wanted to. Now, there are scholarships and other funding available through different institutions, and each university will often offer different packages. And you only find out about these through doing your research. That's why I've decided to touch upon them today, because this could actually be a really significant amount of money that could feed into your budget ahead of going to university. But if you don't do the research, you might not find out about them. So, for example, I'm going to use University of Hull has yet to kind of land on our scholarships for the upcoming year. So I'm going to use last year's examples, but we had a scholarship in place whereby if the household income of an applicant was under £25,000, we would actually offer, I think it's £1,000 in the first year to help them with their budgeting, to help them with their income. In terms of academic achievement, again, each university is different, but some actually offer scholarships based on academic achievement. So maybe if you get 3 A's, for example, you could be entitled to some money or a bit of money off your accommodation. You're staying in university accommodation. But again, you only find out about these through doing your research. So it's very, very important that you do so. Some universities will offer scholarships on sporting ability. So I think, for example, Loughborough University is a very, very strong sporting university. And they might offer some scholarships to attract elite athletes into their institution, maybe athletes who have a vision of going on to work for Team GB, maybe to compete at the Olympics. If you play a particular instrument, you might find some money available to you. Sometimes where you're from can affect how much money you can get through scholarships at university, sometimes the course. So in my own experience, as part of my American Studies course, I actually spent my 3rd year studying in America. And I actually chose to study at the University of Alabama, which is in a place called Tuscaloosa, which is probably the most, Alabama word you can possibly come up with, Tuscaloosa. Now, I chose to study there out of around 40 different US universities that are available to me. And the reason I did so is because the University of Alabama was trying to attract students to their institution. They were trying to attract international students. So they actually offered me free accommodation, and they offered me, I think it was about £1,500 per term to be there. So that really impacted my choice. So that's a perfect example of actually a university having an incentive to attract students. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why I chose that university. Now, there could also be extra money available depending on your personal circumstances as well. So if you're a care leaver, for example, if you're a young carer, universities might have different pots of money available to help you, because there is the acknowledgement that each person's individual situation is different. And some people might need a little bit of supplementary income to help pay their way at university. But again, you often only find out about these through doing your research. So the responsibility is very much on yourself to do so. Now, depending on, again, what courses you choose in your personal situation, there might be some extra funding. NHS courses such as nursing, midwifery might have some extra funding available for you. Again, they're quite intensive courses. It can be tricky to get part-time jobs to run alongside your course. So actually, there might be funding available to help you, and also to attract you into a particular profession, for example. There might be childcare grants available if you have children. If you study medicine and dentistry, your bursary might actually cover your 5th year onwards. And I mentioned I did social work degree, and actually my social work degree, I got a bursary off the back of that, which was again an NHS funding bursary, but it was to attract people into the field of social work and to train as a social worker. And the great thing about bursaries and scholarships, and the key thing that's different from them and loans, is the fact if you receive a scholarship or a bursary, that's money that you don't have to pay back. That's completely free money. It's only your loans you would have to pay back. Okay, I'm just going to touch upon a little bit about how to budget your money, maybe how you can prepare in the build up to university, how you can put yourself in the strongest possible situation. So obviously we've looked at what our pot of money can be. So it's important to have that figure to hand so that then you can start budgeting your money. My top tip for preparing for university is to track your spending now. Just keep a really simple record of what you're spending your money on, because you'd be really surprised at how certain costs can add up. So for example, using myself, I love my coffee. And on a typical day at university, I will often find myself buying a coffee a day from one of the Costas or the Starbucks that we have on campus, because we are fortunate to have both. I'm quite basic in my needs. I'm a filter coffee, I'm an Americano person. So actually I'm looking at about £2 a coffee. Now over the course of a week, you can obviously do the maths, that's £10 on coffee. Over the course of a month, I'm spending upwards of £40 on coffee, and that soon adds up and it really builds up. But I try not to think about that personally, because that makes me feel bad about buying my coffee on campus. But that does actually give a really strong insight into where your money goes. I'm often one of those people who looks at my bank account at the end of the month and I'm like, have I spent that money? And the truth is, I spend it on small things that accumulate over time. I'll go and have a lunch out. I'll enjoy a meal maybe a couple of times a week. But those forms of spending do add up. So actually, if you start tracking your spending now, you can identify where your money's going and where you might need to trim back to help a budget stretch a little bit further at university. And when it comes to a budget, devise a budget and stick to it. So in the same way that you can track your spending now, you can actually set up a budget now and have a bit of a road test of it before you get to university, because you're not going to get it right first time. Chances are first time you might be over strict with yourself and realize that actually you've not left much room for the fun stuff in there, for the occasional coffee every now and then, for a night out, for buying yourself a treat. So you can do that now, you can test it out now, so that when you get to university, you've got a real strong confidence that the budget you've got in place is going to work for you. What I would say as well, when you come to devising a budget, do it based on what works for you and what's important for you. So we have to consider things like physical health. We have to consider things like mental health. We have to look at the activities that you have in your life that really help ground you and really help you to stay in a really positive place at university. And when you get in a budget, you can talk to the people around you, but someone might say, oh, do you really need that gym membership? Is that absolutely essential? Do you need it in your budget? Only you know if that's essential. If actually the gym membership is the thing that keeps you grounded, and that physical exercise on a regular basis is the thing that really helps you push on and achieve the things that you want in life, then I would argue that's absolutely essential, and you need to keep that in your budget. So again, by doing this now, by getting these plans in place now, you can find out what's working for you and what's best for you. Now, when it comes to finding, there are budget tools available. So for example, I've given one example there, but there's actually loads of budget tools available that can help you just input a bit of information into a spreadsheet, keep track of your spending. So I'd encourage you again, just to have a play about with them now, and then you'll know at university which one works best for you. Have a bit of a shop around for student bank accounts, because actually when you come into university, that's for a lot of people the first time that they would get a bank account. And banks know this, and they'll offer you incentives to try and get you on board, but be wary of what the incentives are and factor in your personal circumstance. So for example, I went for a bank account that offered me a rail card, and it offered me, I think it was a third off my rail travel. And I did so knowing that I'd be making regular trips from Hull to Manchester to visit my family. So that actually saved me a fortune. I think if it was left to me, I think I took that bank account on advice of friends and family, but if it was left to me, I'd go for the one with the free iPhone or something like that. But actually over the course of a year, it's actually the rail travel that serves me best, and it saves me most money. When you get to university, in particular, when you get your academic email address, so for mine, for example, is at hull.ac.uk, you're often given access to cheap deals and cheap offers that can give you really good value on really high-end products. So for example, through UniTasterDays, which is one student discounting service that's available, you can get really good offers off things like Amazon Prime. I think you get it for half price. Apple products, you'll often have deals on like Topman, Topshop, River Island. So have a bit of a look around and see what cheap deals are available, and research what help there is for you as well. This can be including looking at the universities, as I've already touched upon, looking at the scholarships and bursaries, but also what other financial help there is available for you. Now, I can't emphasize that enough doing the research, because actually when you're looking at universities, you might end up torn between two universities. And if one of those universities is offering you £2,000 to be there and the other isn't, that can really help to make that choice. So make sure you put the time in and you do your research. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Jon shortly, but I just wanted to give you a bit of a heads up. There's a few websites there that you could find to be really helpful. So we've got the Student Finance website. Again, you can start looking at that now. When it comes to student finance, I think it opens early 2021 for 2021 starters at university. So get your application in as soon as possible for student finance. Sometimes if you leave it a little bit later, you can find that your first payment might be delayed if student finance do have a bit of a backup. So get that in as soon as you can. The student room has loads of insight on student finance. I've already mentioned Money Ready for University that can help you with budgeting and preparing for the costs that maybe you've not considered. And I always point people towards Martin Lewis Money Saving Expert website. He's got fantastic resources on his website that look at student finance and explain it in really easy terms, look at budgeting options, look at money offers that are there. So again, these are just a few websites that are available. There are loads out there. But again, like I say, do your research, prepare well ahead of going to university. And then I'm going to hand over to Jon now, who's eventually going to hand over to Ellen, who's going to talk a little bit more about being at university. Thanks so much, Jon.
Thank you, Jordan. Excellent. Thank you. Really enjoyed that session. So that's Jordan talking about budgeting at university and also giving you some of the pre-application stuff that's really useful to know about student finance. But really enjoyed that session, particularly like the mention about the fund money that your friend said. Jordan touched on NHS funding for courses, which is a session in itself, and we actually covered that last week. So you can visit UniTasterDays.com/Tuesdays to watch back on that recording. But thank you, Jordan. Really enjoyed that session and completely agree about Martin Lewis as well. A great source of information about student finance. Our next speaker is Ellen Bailey, who is joining us from Bishop Grosseteste University. And Ellen is a Student Recruitment Officer. And whereas Jordan touched on the pre-application side of student finance, Ellen's going to give you some more budgeting tips when you're at university and also touch on some of the student finance aspects that is really important to know after you finish and when you get towards the end of your course. So with that, Ellen, I'll pass the floor to you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. And yes, thanks for having me, Jon. And thank you, Jordan, for that really informative first session. So welcome to anyone who is watching today. Like Jon said, my name's Ellen. I'm a Student Recruitment Officer here at Bishop Grosseteste University. A little bit about myself before we start. I only graduated last year from the University of Lincoln. I studied journalism there for 3 years. And I've stayed in Lincoln and gone to Bishop Grosseteste, where I now work, and have been there ever since. So today, I'll hopefully provide you with a bit more of an insight into budgeting whilst you're at university, as well as how far your student loan will go. And then we'll also touch a little bit on repayments as well after you graduate and when you'll need to start paying back these loans. So let me share my screen. Fantastic. So hopefully you can all see that now. So in this session, I will briefly be covering, well, I know Jordan's mentioned it already in that first session, but a little bit we'll touch on the difference between maintenance loan and tuition fees and how this will cover your tuition fees. Also how to budget with a student loan, working out how much your loan covers for your living expenses and whether you'll need to support yourself whilst you're at university with additional income. I'll also include some budgeting tips, what I did and what other students here at BGU have done whilst being a student. And then we'll also briefly cover loan repayments. So once you graduate, when you'll need to start paying back your loans and how to go about doing this. So if you're thinking about going to university for the first time as an undergraduate student, then you'll have two main costs that you'll need to apply for. Number one is tuition fees, which cover the cost of your course fees and is paid directly to your college or university. And two, your maintenance loan, which helps cover the cost of living expenses, and the exact amount you'll get will depend on your household income. So tuition fee loans go directly, like I mentioned, to your college or university. So they won't go into your bank account, so you won't directly see that yourself. And the £9,250 maximum tuition fee does apply to most students living in England who are planning at studying at British universities and colleges. There is a deadline for applications to Student Finance England. This is usually around late spring. And the student loans company are the company that pay your tuition fees to your university in time for the start of your course. Now, maintenance loan, again, as Jordan has mentioned, so I won't go on this too much, is completely different to your tuition fee loan, as this covers your living expenses. All eligible students are entitled to get some maintenance loan, and the amount you're entitled to will depend on your household income, your course, where you live, where you're going to study, and your personal circumstances. And you'll use this maintenance loan to help with living costs. So it'll go on your rent, it'll go on your food, going out, socialising, spending it on activities and beer whilst you're a full-time student. Doesn't mean you can't take up a part-time job whilst you're a student, and your part-time job also won't affect the amount of maintenance loan that you're entitled to. This loan is paid directly into your bank account at the start of each term. So usually you'll receive a text message from SLC telling you you're about to receive it, which for a student, I remember it was one of the most exciting texts you'll receive all term. And your maintenance loan will most likely be paid in 3 big instalments at the start of the term. So it can be really easy actually to overspend on this. So you need to be really careful. Again, this is just an example. I know Jordan had a similar table up on his slides, but this is the kind of maintenance loan that you could expect from your household's combined income, and if you're living away from home, which most students tend to do. And this is usually based off what your parents or guardians both earn. If your parents have separated and no longer live together, you should base this income on the household that you reside in most. The maintenance loan is intended to cover a student's living costs, but it's means tested based on your household income. And only those with the low household income on the table there will receive and be eligible for the full financial support. We're seeing a lot more students actually nowadays choosing to stay at home and commute to university, especially at the moment with what's going on with COVID. And so if you do choose to live at home, you won't get as big a loan as you would if you're moving away, but you are still entitled to receive some. So yeah, the amounts are going to be lower because you need to take into account your parents aren't probably going to be charging you as much, if at all, food and rental. So it's going to be more expensive if you live away from home. So you should be used to getting a smaller amount. So extra support, yes, there are many extra support options that might be available to you that don't need repaying. You could be entitled to bursaries, grants, or other allowances based on your personal circumstances. Be sure to check the government website and Student Finance England websites for more information on these. And also it's worth contacting the university you've applied for to find what bursaries or scholarships that they might be offering, because these change yearly, and it's a great chance to find out what they do, because it's well worth getting on one of those if you can. Again, if you're interested in teaching or social work or working in other healthcare professions, you might even be entitled to additional extra financial support. These grants and bursaries are brought in from the government as an incentive for students to start a career in certain fields. I know, for example, certain teaching disciplines are really high in demand at the moment. If you're interested in teaching chemistry, maths, languages, physics, you could be entitled to a £26,000 bursary a year. So, it's a real incentive there to do that. So let's take a look at the kind of living costs that you'll be faced with once you've started your university experience. While more students choose to live away from the family home to save on living costs, for many, it's usually the first experience of living away from home. And this exciting time does come with a number of new responsibilities, including the need to take control of your finances. In fact, 71% of students revealed recently in the National Student Money Survey that they wish they had a better financial education before coming to university. So it's really important to go to university knowing exactly how much money you're going to receive, have a budgeting plan about how you're going to spend this, and think about other ways that you might need to support yourself financially whilst being a student. Between accommodation costs and making the most of student life, budgeting for university can be tough, and it's a real balance between wanting to enjoy your university experience and doing things for yourself, being independent, but also being responsible enough to manage your finances and to make sure you're not getting into debt whilst you're at university. So let's start with a whistle-stop tour of how you can budget at university. So if you receive your maintenance loan or other means-tested funding at the beginning of each term, it can seem like a lot of money all at once, but making it last for both the academic year and over the holidays can be quite a stretch. So it's a good idea to work out a budget based on the money that you have coming in and out regularly. So firstly, add up your total student income. For example, think about maintenance loans. How much do these cover? Perhaps your whole rent, your whole bills, extra allowances, or they might not even be able to cover the cost of your yearly accommodation. You might not even have enough for that. So you really need to take that into consideration. Income from a job, you could consider having a part-time job whilst you're at university, or you might have saved some money if you've worked over the long summer break between sixth form or college and starting uni. So if there's any savings there, would you want to use those whilst you're a student at uni? Bursary, scholarships and grants, again, see whether the university or whether the government are able to offer any additional resources for you there. Money from parents or other family members. Perhaps your parents are giving you a weekly or monthly allowance by direct debit to support you. You might need to discuss this with them. And any savings or investments. Try not to dig too much into these. I know for me personally, I had a little bit of savings before I went to university, and I wouldn't dare touch them for that. I'd like to save them for adulting things like buying my first house and such. But if you really do need to dip into them, this is always an option, if absolutely necessary, but just try not to delve into your savings, because you don't want to come out of university after 3 or 4 years and realise you've got absolutely no money left. So worth bearing in mind. So how do you save money as a student? There's a couple of ideas that our students have recommended that I know they've used at university. Once you know your total income, it's important to calculate your expenses. Think about how much you're wanting to spend on food and drink. Set yourself a weekly or monthly budget, and then think about how much are your bills. If you're living in halls of residence, then the bills will probably be included in your rent, but sometimes they're not, so you really need to check this. But other bills as well, including your mobile phone, gym memberships, Jordan mentioned, things like that really need to be taken into consideration. And then also accommodation fees, such as rent, insurance for valuables. Obviously, this is a huge expense. And then travel costs, including fuel, kind of maintenance and insurance if you have your own car or you're driving. Train tickets again, if you're planning on visiting home a lot. Study materials as well are really important. So laptops, research books, writing materials are vital. And of course, you're still a student and you're still going to want to enjoy your university experience to the fullest. So you're going to want to have some money left over for you to spend on clothes, going out for food, going out drinking, Freshers Week, lots of, extracurricular activities. So you want to have a bit of money left over to still live as a student. Just make sure that your income is either more or equal to your outgoing expenses on a weekly or monthly budget. And there's some really useful student budget calculators actually, which you can find on Which, and UCAS have one as well that's really brilliant, that can help you calculate your living expenses. So yeah. So saving money as a student, a couple of tips from our students. Entertaining and socialising, so Freshers Weeks, student nights, sports clubs, socials, gigs, fancy dress, coffees, lunches. The cost of socialising and entertaining can really quickly add up, but being sociable doesn't have to necessarily be expensive. Consider taking part in free events at your union, offers that are going on, kind of 2-for-1 budgets at cinema, or alternatives to going out. You can host a party at your house or a games night. So there's lots of alternatives to going out and spending money in bars and clubs. Course materials, studying books, photocopying, printing. Whilst all these costs can seem really small, they soon add up over time. So try and keep these expenses to a minimum. Using your library books, be sure to avoid late fees as well. I know that I've done that a couple of times, returned a book really late and been faced with quite a big fine. So you need to be careful of that. But you can also print in black and white. That saves quite a bit of money. Printing on both sides. I know it seems like a really small thing, but it does make a big difference in the long run. And also, rather than buying brand new study books, try and find groups on Facebook or other social media platforms. There's a lot of old students that are selling their old books. So as long as these are up to date, it's a lot cheaper buying them secondhand than buying brand new ones online. Transport, whether it's your commute to class or you're heading back home for the holidays, you'll need to include travel costs in your budget. And there are various student cards, travel cards to deal with this. So it's worth checking what transport companies offer while you're studying, and also try and book tickets in advance, because often these are far cheaper than booking a train ticket last minute. 16 to 25 rail card, again, Jordan mentioned earlier, I still have that and I think it's brilliant. It saves you a third on train fares. And then there's also a young person's coach card, which is the same, your third off, but obviously for coach. And then if you're in London as well, you can get a student Oyster card, which saves money. And then student discounts. So there are loads of great discounts available to students in shops, in restaurants, transport, but don't use this as a reason to spend money on things that you don't really need. A good starting point is the National Union and a Students card, so the NUS card. So this is great. You can use that in many shops, but you can also just usually use your university ID card that you'll get when you've enrolled at university. You'll find that food and drink will be some of your biggest outgoings whilst you're a student, especially if you've moved away from home for the first time and you aren't used to doing your own food shopping and cooking. It's really easy to overspend on food, actually. So it's really important that you shop around for the best deals in the supermarkets and to plan your meals in advance, so you're not panic buying expensive items once you get to the shop. It's also worth shopping around to try and find the cheapest supermarkets to go to. If you're near an Aldi or Lidl, these are great, as we know they're really quite cheap. But also your new town and city that you've just moved to might have their own, food markets or high street butchers that might be cheaper than the big branded supermarkets. So it's definitely worth checking that out. If you get on with your housemates, you might even want to share your food budget with them and kind of do a weekly big shop together. That way you can take it in turns to cook for each other in the evenings, and you probably end up saving a little bit of money if you're all collectively buying shared food and you're buying things in bulk. You might even be able to save a bit more money than you would be if you're just making meals for yourself. A few other tips that I can think of. Making a list before you go to the shop. I know if I don't make a list and go, I end up buying all sorts of rubbish. So being organised before you go. And then also learning quite a few easy dishes, either from your mum and dad, or if you're inventive, making big dishes up in bulk and then freezing a couple in obviously your freezer and then getting them out when you've got really can't be bothered to cook another night. It's definitely worth doing, and I've done that a number of times. So being organised and cooking in bulk when you're in the mood and freezing it, some of the best suggestions. So you could also find part-time work. Try and look for work as soon as possible, because when you go to university, there's likely to be lots of competition because everyone's kind of after the same part-time job. In the current climate, there's probably going to be less jobs going in bars and restaurants, but there'll still be a demand for some bars and some restaurants, especially a demand for workers in supermarkets. There might also be opportunities for part-time work on campus. At our university, we employ students to work at our on-campus cinema, and we use student ambassadors to help support us when we're visiting schools and doing outreach work. So it's always worth checking if there are any jobs available to you on campus. Once you've worked out your budget, you'll see if taking on a part-time job is a good idea. This could be during the holidays, or it could even be during term time whilst you've got less university work on and you might have moved home. But just make sure you don't neglect your studies. Research shows that more than 20 hours of work a week can have a negative impact on your academic performance. So if you're aiming for a job during term time, try and find a good work and study balance. Okay, so help, I'm spending more than I'm earning. This is a real common problem faced by thousands of students. So just consider the following. If you really are struggling, increase your income. Depending on your study schedule, try and take on part-time work. It could make a real difference to your budget. Speak to an advisor. Your university or college should have a student money advisor or support services that can help you manage your money, and they're always there to help. So it's definitely worth checking out if you're struggling, and even if it's making you unwell, if you're really stressing about your finances, absolutely reach out to your student support services. And then 3, it might seem obvious, but can you reduce your expenses anymore? Have a look at what you're spending money on. Are there any areas that you could cut down on? Perhaps swapping branded products for supermarket owned brands, or sharing meal costs could really help you save money. Okay, repayment. So let's wind up 3 or 4 years into the future. You've had a fantastic time at university, you've got your degree, hopefully looking or have already found your graduate job. And then it dawns on you, you've got all these student loans to pay back. They're nothing to worry about. It's not going to rinse you dry as soon as you get your first job after uni. But it's still important to remember that tuition fees and maintenance loans do need repaying. So the current average graduate salary at the moment in the UK is just over £23,000. So most graduates won't actually be repaying their loan straight away. I've tried to put this as easy as possible because I know I find finance is really difficult to understand, but you'll start repaying just 9% of your income earned over £26,575, which means, for example, if you're earning £27,000 a year, you'll only pay back 9% on £425, which means you'll only be paying back £38.25 throughout the year, which equates to £3.18 a month. So it's nothing really. And how do these repayments come out? So the deductions will be made through the HMR tax system if you're employed. And because it's such a small amount, hopefully it'll be barely noticeable and it becomes directly out of your payslip, as you can see from the example of my slide. And if your income does fall below £26,575, the repayments just will automatically stop. So you don't need to worry about contacting student loans and telling them not to take it out. It'll automatically do it for you. You'll carry on making monthly repayments as long as you are earning above that income threshold for around 30 years, either until you pay back the whole amount or until that loan is cancelled. And I think that kind of finishes up the presentation on student budgeting today. I hope you've all found it really useful, and I hope you've learned a couple of topics on being sensible with your money at university. If you want any more information following this event today, please scan the QR code or simply type in that. And I'll hand back to Jon now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen. An excellent introduction looking at budgeting at university. I really enjoyed that. And it's been a long time since I went to university, but I can completely remember getting the living cost paid into my bank account. And you have that temporary good feeling when your bank account looks really healthy before you get excited and go and spend it all, which you shouldn't do. I'd take Ellen's advice, budget. And certainly don't return your library books late, because you definitely don't want to be wasting money on library fines. A big thank you to Ellen, big thank you to Jordan, who opened things up today. So Jordan joined us from the University of Hull, Ellen, the presentation just then, joining us from Bishop Grosseteste University. Really enjoyed those 2 sessions, looking at a massively important subject, which is university finance and also budgeting. And finance is by far the biggest barrier to university for students. So fingers crossed, Ellen's excellent advice when it comes to repayments was really handy for you. And I can't stress enough, if you earn anything under the current threshold, 26,575, which actually is going to be over £27,000 next year, is you don't pay anything back until you hit those points. So if you're worried about how repayments work, the only way you're going to be paying big repayments when it comes to university is if you're going to be paying big salaries. Anyway, finish things there. Really hope you've got a lot from this session. Thank you to everyone joining live. If you're watching back on the recording, I hope you found it really useful. And a big thanks again to our speakers. See you all soon. Take care. Goodbye.